Good morning. My name is Anne-Marie Santamarina, and I'm excited to welcome you here to session 3 of the SIP and Secure webinar series that Lincoln IT has been hosting in correlation with National Cybersecurity Month, October. So it's our pleasure to have with us today in partnership Datto. We've been working with Datto for a very long time, and I'm very excited to have Mike DePalma here, who will be leading us through today's presentation. Mike, thank you for being here. And thank everybody for taking time out of your morning. I'm gonna hand it over to Mike, and he's gonna be walking us through some of the experiences that Datto has had and just some of the lessons learned around COVID and returning to work. And so thanks again for being here, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm Mike DePalma. I'm the Senior Channel Development Manager at Datto. So we are a backup disaster recovery company based out of Norwalk, Connecticut. So not too far. So my role normally is to be on the road 3, 4, 5 days a week doing in-person presentations, whether it's industry events, small seminars, things like that. And so for me, these last several months haven't been crazy because I've basically been working remote. That being said, Datto was always a company that really frowned upon work remote. Everybody had to be in the office. And so as we all sort of learned how to do that, and we're starting to slowly move back into the office in some capacity, there's some real data that we have behind how that is going to work. And that came in conjunction with a lot of conversations with other companies, small, large, medium-sized companies all over the world. So we are a global company, founded in 2007, so we're in our 13th year. We protect over 550 petabytes of data in our data centers. So we've got 9 data centers around the world. So that's a little bit about what we do. If you have any questions, obviously you could reach out to the Lincoln IT folks afterwards. But today what we're going to cover is, all right, how do we return to work? What is that going to look like on both the technology side and just on a people side? Is it going to be a hybrid type of system? Is it going to be fully back in the office? Everybody's got kind of different ways about going about it. Figuring out what that means for your people. Can they stay productive in this hybrid kind of work from anywhere environment? That's critical. Your office space, your physical office space, what's that going to look like? I could tell you, unfortunately, Datto made a huge renovation to our sales floor in Q4 of last year, where they lowered all the cubicles, they put in these airtight pods for meetings, all of which are pretty much useless at this point. So the office is another space that we're looking into. And then ultimately your technology. What is that going to look like? We've all adopted new technologies probably over the last 7 or 8 months. And what is that going to look like as we start to return to the office? And then a really important piece is, how are you communicating this to your customers? Letting them know, what you're doing proactively. And I'll get into some of the reasons why that's important as well. But let's start with the people aspect of it. Everybody's in a different situation. Early on, I was doing presentations about working remote and managing a remote workforce. And, we kind of get tied into, think about the parents. I've got a 7 and a 9-year-old. They're doing the homeschooling while they're trying to work and all the rest. And that's tough. But you got to realize that every single person's got their own different issues, whether it's the single person living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan, some flat somewhere, being stuck there without any human contact. Now they're coming back.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
I was just dialing into some other Zoom things.
So one of the things that I think is first and foremost, which I think is very important, is to create a task force. And this sounds like, it's another layer, right? Another subcommittee, but this is extremely important for several reasons. One, you want to have a task force that really is part of every single department that you have, right? So everybody's represented, everybody has a place at the table to just come up with ideas. You're never going to just on that first shot write down your plans for return to the office and it's going to work perfectly. There's going to be some leeway in there, and it's a living and breathing document. A task force kind of accelerates that. But on the other side of things, when you talk about some of the folks being nervous coming back into the office, this gives them a safe place to go and express their concerns instead of going to their boss. Some people are embarrassed of the fact that they're very nervous because they don't want to talk about the reasons why. So the task force is one of those ways that really smooths that over. And within that task force and within your company culture, over communication is key. One of the things that happened, and I'm not blaming any managers or business owners, but when everything kind of went down in mid-March into early April, it was chaotic. Everybody was moving in different directions. And what I heard time and time again was, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We don't know whether we're going back to the office next month. We don't know How do I access all my business tools and all those type of things? And, everybody was in that same scenario. So now that you go back and you're kind of doing a lessons learned about what you did in the first kind of go around that first wave, take a look at that and say, let's communicate as much as possible. Even if we don't know the answer, let's just let them know that we're thinking about it. So that task force really is just an open place for people to express ideas. Having a set in stone schedule is important. And that means, letting other people know what everyone's schedule is. Is Bill coming in 2 days a week? And Jane is coming in 4 days a week. Why is it necessary for that to happen? Why are we letting so-and-so work remote? Because you don't want that little conflict that's happening behind the scenes. Like, hey, why am I in the office and other folks aren't? I've got several family members that work at City Hall here in Norwalk, and they started to go back several months ago. And they're still complaining because they don't know what the schedule is. They don't know whether, they're going to be working in the office in a month. They don't know why they have to come in and this other department doesn't. And just a simple communication of that and having a simple schedule that folks can refer to, even if they disagree with it, at least they have it in front of them. And they're not questioning what is happening. They might question the why, and you can't prevent that. But it gives them something to stare at and say, okay, I know this is what my schedule is, with obviously the caveat that it could be flexible, but at least I kind of get a sense of that. And then the folks that are staying remote, and there's some studies out there, there's over 70% of businesses in America are saying that at least a portion of their staff is going to work remote through the end of the year. A lot of folks are staying completely remote. Datto is. So, you have to establish what that work from home policy looks like. Now, I always look through it through the lens of, cybersecurity and what that looks like. So, that needs to be documented. You can't just assume that folks know the culture of security that you might have within your office also translates over to the kitchen or the home office or wherever they're doing their work from. And this is a good time to review those policies and update those policies, right? When's the last time you've gone through your policies? Does it just happen on onboarding? Typically, that's what businesses do. You'll go through your policies and procedures up front, they onboard, and then it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. This is a really good opportunity to spend some time going through all of those policies and then kind of doing that gap analysis and saying, hey, we created this document 3 years ago. The world we live in now is vastly different. We need to update this. In terms of the safety practices, there are simple things you could do within the office. And I don't think, I'm really reinventing the wheel here, but simple things. Some of the offices up in Canada are open for Datto, and they've got, traffic flow, arrows going this way and that. They've got policies as to where those meetings will occur. And so it's always better to be overly safe. And I get it. Sometimes, everybody's frustrated and all the rest, but you want to be as cautious as your most nervous employee, because you don't want them to feel like, hey, I can't speak up because everybody feels very comfortable and, oh, we don't really have to wear a mask, or I can wear my mask down here. You never know that one person in the office that's really uncomfortable with that. Again, it's better to be safe than sorry, making sure that those are all in place. And then when you look at that return to the office, you really do have to kind of ease your way into it. This is not a light switch. We were forced on the front end to have that light switch because we were all thrown out there, really quickly. But on the way back, take your time and make sure that, it's eased back in and not an email comes out on Wednesday saying, hey, Monday morning, we're all back in the office for a 9 o'clock status meeting, right? It's got to be eased in. And again, that leads into the communication. And then it goes without saying, consulting with your local health officials. And the reason why these plans are fluid is because it really requires some agility there on all aspects, especially on your technology side, because we don't know where everybody's going to be working. But the bottom line is, in terms of productivity, you have to make sure that wherever your folks are physically sitting, you have all the tools in place, all the security measures in place to replicate that office experience wherever that is. And so that's, again, that communication which we keep trying to hammer home needs to be there. That, yes, we're going to try this out. Hopefully everything works. We have no idea what December is going to bring. So, this is our plan. And these are our plans if something does go south and we have to go back and work remote. And so, simple just office things, the deep cleanse, when you look at the shared office space, what does that look like? Get really granular in these details and document them. And make sure that those social distancing guidelines are met, not just on the safety side of things and the health side of things, but on the compliance side of things as well. That's where the communication and the collaboration comes in, so everybody feels comfortable. You don't want that disgruntled employee saying, I felt like I couldn't speak up. So follow those guidelines, refer to those. If there's people that are frustrated saying, hey, this is so burdensome. I've got to do all these things. Well, this is why we're doing it, right? This is why we do all the health code and your instruction. This is why we follow OSHA, all these different types of things. This is the real world right now. So I mentioned those traffic flow patterns, simple stuff like that. People will follow them once they get used to it. Group meetings. Now, we've all been on Zoom for the last 7-8 months, obviously, or Microsoft Teams. I have a feeling that even though we're going back to the office, those collaboration tools are here to stay. So if you're frustrated by them, I'm just guessing that those are here to stay, because there will be a point where maybe an in-person meeting makes sense, but it's going to be one of those socially distanced meetings, and people are eventually going to get into the groove of, let's just do this over Zoom. Even if we're in the office together, let's just do this over Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever you're doing. And then even on the visitor side of things, that includes like deliveries and everything like that. Make sure those protocols are in place. And again, communicate all these steps that are being taken so that people understand the why you're doing it and exactly how you're doing it and meeting all of those things. And then again, if we are thrown back into that work from anywhere, work from home, you need a reclosure plan in place as well. So on the technology side, the folks that I focus on and Lincoln IT and all the rest, the first thing you need to do is really evaluate all the new technologies that you probably have now put in place that weren't in place at the beginning of the year. Let's take a full inventory of everything, including maybe new laptops that are out there, new tablets that were given out to your employees. Inventory all of that, and then make a determination of, okay, do we continue to need all of this? My guess is probably. You're not going to take a ton of those new endpoints offline. And again, all right, we've got them inventoried. We know where they physically live. Okay, this endpoint's at home. This guy's in the office. That's great. But also, are every one of those new devices or new pieces of software protected? Because these criminals, they know that all this new technology is out there. They know it's new to a lot of businesses, and they seize upon that. They are very opportunistic. So they will seize on the fact that there's some unknowns going out there. Within days of the pandemic hitting, there were new spear phishing attacks that go out. And they were saying, okay, this is from the CDC. This is from the World Health Organization. Click here for information about your area. And these were malicious emails, and people were falling for them because everything was chaotic, right? There was a website set up just like that Johns Hopkins website that everybody takes a look at, especially early on. How many cases here, how many cases in this county, this country, all the rest. There was a website that mirrored it almost exactly. You would not know it wasn't that. And it was being shared on social media in the middle of the night. People were then clicking on it, sharing it, texting it to each other and all the rest. And that was a malicious website. So you have to know that they are going to seize upon any sort of low-hanging fruit they might have. And this is that second wave of, okay, they seized upon the first wave, everybody moving to, potentially insecure devices or networks. And then now they're seeing the chaos of they're going back to the office. It's going to take them a week to settle in. This is when I'm going to go, hammer home all these things. So every single piece of information and software needs to be protected. And that's where the security audit comes in. All right, we have all these new solutions that came in. Hopefully you're working with folks like Lincoln IT who are able to do that all remotely and quickly and get you back up and running. Because first and foremost, you got to keep business up and running, right? But now is the time, okay, all of these new things, let's take a look at the security of everything. Wherever data lives, it needs to be backed up. And there needs to be a layer of security. And on top of that, that first layer of security is training. Because the vast majority of these attacks occur because somebody opened the door by clicking on an email, an attachment, one of those type of things. You're much more apt to fall for those things when you're in an environment you're not used to. It's just human nature. I did a panel last month for some folks out in Pennsylvania, and there was a gentleman who was an attorney who focused on the cybersecurity side. He said in Pennsylvania, there's been a huge spike in wire fraud, where an email comes in and says, okay, we got a new routing number. Can you make this payment? It looks like it comes from the controller in your office or your boss. Whereas if you're in a physical office space, you might poke your head up and say, I've never gotten this kind of email before, so it's a little suspicious. Again, when you're in your kitchen, that guard might be down. Or if you are back in the office, but the person that sent the email is working remote, you might let your guard down. And so it starts with that. And that's where that security audit starts. You make sure you have an inventory of everything. Is everything secure? And then communicate that to your team and say, we have every piece of technology in place to protect us. But ultimately, the fact of the matter is the vast majority of this downtime and data loss comes from user error. And when we talk about that home technology, hopefully everybody in March and April had a company issued device that they were going home with. The real world just dictates that that's not the case. A lot of people were working on personal devices. Maybe it was just the family computer that everybody used. So now, even if that's the case, it needs to be inventory, and it needs to be, you need to make sure that every security measure is in place wherever that person is working from. So that goes for the work from home technology as well. That gap analysis that I talked about, I actually came out of the construction management industry. We used to do big schools and hospitals and office buildings. And at every project, we do a lessons learned, even if the project went extremely smooth, because there's always things you can learn. And so there should be an analysis of everything that you've done up to this point. And if you're on this webinar, you've made it this far, which is great. But take a look at some of those gaps that you had, because you're going to find those gaps. And again, this is a great opportunity and a small plug there for Lincoln IT, because this is what they do. They'll come in and give you an analysis of, all right, here's everything you have. Potentially you're completely safe, but there's probably some gaps that need to be filled. And it could be very inexpensive gaps, but you need to make sure you do that gap analysis, because it's very rare that everybody gets it right on the first shot. When you look at just the auditing of the users and what access they have, I see it all the time. And I'm sure Lincoln IT does too. You walk into an office and everybody's got admin access to all these different softwares when they don't need access to it. Make sure that your team only has access to the data that they need. Because if somebody is attacked and they have admin access, now that attack can go migrate to everything that they have access to. So, simple things like that. Go and take an inventory. Okay, what does Tina have access to? All right, let's take a look at it. Okay, well, she really doesn't need access to this. Why does she? Well, at the time, we all got thrown into this, new environment, and we just had to get it done, so everybody got admin access. Take a step back, make sure that find out exactly what everybody has access to, and make sure they only have access to the data that they need to, especially if they're going back to the office, right? As everybody's moving in different directions. And then, looking at all of those workstations and hardware and all those things, as folks are starting to put together their 2021 budgets, they're looking at IT, because it's going to be the backbone of your company over the next 12 months at a minimum, as we go through this chaos, and you need the agility. But take a look at all of those new devices that you might have put in somebody's hand. Is it still necessary to have that? Maybe we can take it offline. We don't need it anymore. All the business software that's out there, might have been trialing some different things. All right, we never really liked that, but we never took it down. Just do a full analysis of everything from the hardware to the software that you put in place, and get a sense of whether you need that in place going forward. And then you got to evaluate your service providers, the services that you have. I mean, all of the vendors that you work with. Do an evaluation and have that conversation to make sure they're doing the same thing. You should know, every company that you work with, what their return to the office plan is. Are you guys gonna be going back to the office? You guys gonna be working remote? What are you doing about that? What are you doing? I mean, that's a conversation that's basic, but it should be had. And even if you're just getting some quick bullet points from these folks, it is important to have that conversation. And it might actually spark some new ideas as well. They might be doing something that you hadn't thought of. You bring that to the task force and you incorporate it into your policy. And then again, anything that was removed from the office originally, which is a lot of stuff. I mean, my Datto device, we do backup. I've got my own device that I use for demos. It's at my home right now, sitting right next to my modem. Our team needs to know, our operation teams need to know where that device physically lives, and they do. But they need to know where everything lives. So wherever that lived and wherever it's going to stay or be there for the next couple of months, wherever it physically is needs to be documented and be part of that inventory. So you know what you have, but also where it physically lives. Now, I live in the world of business continuity and backup. And basically what we're talking about here is not just backing up your data, but continuing business operations. If something were to go down, how quickly can you get your team up and running and back to productivity? And so, it used to be pretty simple. You had an on-premise device, you put one of our devices on there, that thing goes down, we virtualize your machine, everything that lived on that machine lives on this on-premise device, and boom, you're off and running. This is now working as your server. Now, data lives in so many different places. And so again, when you're looking at that inventory, you got to say, what are these critical data that if we go down, we cannot operate? And so what is that solution? What happens if this fails? For whatever reason, it might not be an attack. Could be a hardware failure, could be some sort of natural disaster. It's been a tough year all across the country with that stuff. And so, we got to have that plan in place. And, when we look at some of these compliance issues, the government, and we talked about it offline, the government just put out a statement saying that paying the ransom is now illegal. It's been the policy that you're not supposed to do that, But because, what we found is a lot of really bad actors are behind them, whether they're foreign nation states or terrorist organizations. So now it's a full halt on that. And so what happens is if you fall out of compliance in any kind of way, and we're in the Northeast, so compliance is as strict here as anywhere in the world. You got to worry about all these things. And then if you get past that, they're going to come knocking on your door and they're going to say, okay, well, show me what you were doing to protect that data and what you're doing for a disaster recovery plan. A lot of these regulations require that. So now is the time to reassess that and make sure that you have a disaster recovery plan in place. You could review it. You're going to hopefully look at that gap analysis and say, hey, we don't have any plan if this system goes down. And you take a look at that and make sure that regardless of what's happening, you're able to keep your business running, because that downtime is really painful. FEMA put out a study last year that said that 60% of businesses that went down for a week or more never reopened their doors. Now, they were talking about natural disasters, but that downtime applies anywhere that it might happen. And so it is extremely critical that you have these documented in place. And you might have to update that. You probably will have to update that. Hopefully you had something in place prior, a document that you can hand over to somebody coming in on the regulatory side of things. But you need to update that because times have changed. And now that you're going back to the office and working in a remote workforce, you need to be able to document that and say, okay, what happens if this fails? How do we stay operational? What happens if everything goes down? How do I stay productive? And so that's a conversation you really need to have. You need to be testing all of these things. I have conversations all the time about backup, disaster recovery, and people will tell me how often they're taking their backups. Next question I always ask, how often are you testing those backups? Is that testing happen manually? Is somebody responsible for that? Because we just talked about 91% of data loss being user error. That can come on that side as well. But beyond that, and the really important piece is the recovery side of things. Have you ever tried to recover all of this data? How long would that take you to do? Are we talking about several days, hours, weeks? Can you answer that question? It's worth taking the time to actually being able to say, okay, if something went down, I can get back into productivity in 8 hours or whatever that is. And then you assess that and say, hey, is that aggressive enough for us? Can we absorb that? And that's when you go back into that gap analysis and say, here's a gap we have. We tried to do a recovery and we tried to pull 10 terabytes of data down from the cloud and it took us 2 days. We can't be down for 2 days. So let's talk about some other solutions. So testing is extremely critical, especially now. And then, that audit needs to occur at all these different locations. Maybe you've got some satellite offices. What we see a lot of companies do based on, hotspots and all those type of things, that maybe you've got several offices, even if they're relatively close in proximity, one office might be okay to open back up. One office isn't. And so you're looking at where all those locations are. Again, it goes to documenting those things. But the critical aspect of the DR testing is, okay, what if this particular site went down? What would those folks do? Instead of a whole company-wide outage, what happens if something happens in this office or to these home workers? What happens there? And then that leads into, the shift in how we've been doing businesses to the SaaS side of things. We talk about, all these collaboration tools. Those applications need to be protected as well. There are threats out there to O365. There are threats out there to your mobile device. These criminals, everybody has this false sense of security of, hey, all I read about is, on-premise Windows-based servers being attacked. And the vast majority of attacks are happening there. And the reason for that is very simple. The vast majority of on-premise hardware is on-premise Windows devices. And so they're just gonna, it's just a numbers game. They're gonna keep attacking that because there's so much low-hanging fruit. As we see this huge shift and the numbers with Microsoft Teams are just outrageously high, and that battle they're having with Zoom, they're going to follow that data. And there are ransomware variants that are going out to O365 right now, and they look very good. They're very targeted spear phishing attacks to get you to click on these things, and then they've encrypted all of those emails within your system. Now, if you have admin access, now it can migrate and encrypt everything in the whole domain. That's again why you got to make sure folks have access to only what they need to, and then you continue to evaluate. I'm going to an industry event tomorrow, and there's going to be a socially distanced floor of vendors, and there are vendors that exist today that didn't exist 6 months ago, 12 months ago. Everything is evolving so quickly, and some of these technologies are great. Now, what happens a lot of times is when you're trying to handle it yourself and evaluating these things, you wind up kind of cobbling things together. So as you're evaluating these new solutions, you have to make sure they all talk to one another and they all integrate with one another. again, a really good conversation to have with Lincoln IT, even if it's something that, you're not trying to procure through them. Have a conversation with them and say, hey, I'm evaluating this. What do you know about this vendor or their services? Evaluate all those things and see what makes sense. And if you're going to make an investment next year, this is where you need to do. And that all of this boils down to, again, the agility that I mentioned earlier. The agility to say, all my folks can stay productive wherever they live. If something were to happen on the disaster side, we can continue to stay productive, regardless of where they're actually physically working from. So that work from anywhere kind of cliched term, it's cliched for a reason, because it is really what we're looking at for the foreseeable future. And you have to communicate this plan to your customers. This is very critical because they're dealing with all of their chaos, and just that simple call, this isn't even going to get you new business, but it's going to create that stickiness, that simple call just to say, hey, I want to let you know what we're doing right now. I've talked about the communication with your team. You should be communicating that to your clients. Hey, just want to let you know, so you don't find out when you call your sales rep that, hey, yeah, I'm back in the office. Let's be proactive. It might not even apply to them, but it does give them that sense of, hey, this vendor that I'm working with really does care about their employees, care about their data, care about their clients. So have those conversations. And again, they might, when they're sharing what they're doing, they might give you some ideas as well. And, we all live in a world where we all talk. I mean, I sit there and, watch football on Sundays with my family and friends, and everybody kind of talks, what are you guys doing? What's your office doing? You working from home yet? You're working back in the office, all these things. The ability to say that, this is what we're doing can actually lead to new business, because if they're sitting there having those coffee table conversations, and they say, you know what, my one of the companies I work with has a really expensive plan, and we're going to apply that. And so, you should have a call with them and talk about that. So, there's a real reason behind this beyond the stickiness. This could be a business opportunity as well. And so anything that has changed within your delivery and how you're delivering those goods needs to be communicated. The fact that you're protecting all of these new applications, it should be communicated. Again, give them that sense of safety. You should be asking, again, the vendors that you're working with. If you're working with Lincoln IT, make sure that they're practicing what they preach, and I know they are, but have those conversations even with your vendors. If we remember that the Target attack, where all of that information was stolen, it wasn't an attack directly through Target systems. It was through the HVAC vendor. The HVAC vendor had some vulnerabilities, and they were able to go in and access. So it's important to know that all the vendors you're working with are doing the same things that you're doing, or at least have that culture of security. And then again, this is the time to evaluate additional services. And within these conversations, you're going to have some really good ones about what's working and what's not. I randomly had a conversation which wasn't even business related with one of our partners, and they were talking about a new product that they're actually selling. But you look at it, it can take your temperature, and it makes sure that you're wearing a mask. And if there is a temperature, it goes into a database, and you can find out who's been contacted and simple things like that. I wouldn't have known about that unless it was just a conversation. I didn't go and proactively look at that, but you will get some additional protection services through all that. So, I mean, some simple next steps to take from all of this. Take a look at your plan in place right now. I highly encourage getting a second set of eyes on that plan and say, this is what we're trying to do right now. This is our plan for the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Yes, it has to be flexible, but here it is. Am I protected? Am I thinking of everything in terms of what security measures I need to have in place? This is where you reach out to Lincoln IT. Let them do this. This is what they do. And so let them take a look at that plan, or preferably work with you to go through that plan to make sure that you're all protected. We have a return to the office checklist that I can get a hand. It's a simple checklist, but create that. Again, talk to that task force and come up with everything that you could think of. Throw it all up on the whiteboard and say, all right, these are all the things. Can we check off all these boxes? And if we can't, what can we do to try to alleviate that problem? And then when you look at that downtime, and I was talking about that disaster recovery test, hopefully you get a sense of, okay, how long is that going to take? Then you try to put a dollar value on that. We have a recovery time calculator that you can use and just plug in your own numbers. I have X amount of employees, average revenue is this, and it'll tell you for every day you're down, this is the baseline money that you're losing. And then it starts to jump off the page at you and say, oh, the reason why all those businesses don't ever open their doors again after being down for a week is because they're never going to recover that lost time. And they might lose clients because of it. and all the rest. And so you got to put a dollar value on that. And if that dollar value is too high, then you start to have those conversations of where you can address those problems. And maybe you're fine. I mean, hopefully you go and you do that disaster recovery test. You say, okay, my recovery time objective is met. I know I can get my systems back up online in 4 hours, and that's fine with me. At least you've checked off that box. Unless you do that analysis, you cannot check off that box. And so definitely, take a look at that. Some simple things. A lot of it comes through education and conversations. It doesn't necessarily mean making a huge investment into new hardware and software and all those things. But until you do that full audit of what you have and that analysis of everything and all the data, until you do that, you can't answer those questions and you can't check those boxes off. So that's all I have. Hopefully this was helpful. Anne-Marie, I don't know if you want to open it up, if anybody has any questions for me or comments or ideas even you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. On behalf of Lincoln, Mike, I have to say, these are all things that we're thinking about all the time. We're thinking about them for our clients. I know we've had some conversations around them. So I think it's, really valuable information. And, we appreciate it, especially expanding past just the technical side, right? I know we have a technical audience on the phone mostly, but I also know there are some of my clients that are more on the business and compliance side. So hopefully they found that valuable as well. I do want to give it an opportunity to open it up to questions in case anybody does have any questions or anything they'd like to share, any comments they want to make. So we can just pause for a minute here and see if if anybody has anything they want to add.
We covered it all, Anne-Marie. See that?
Yeah, I like that. Well, then I guess, we can just wrap up here. I just want to thank everybody for being with us. Mike, thanks to you and Kyle and the Datto team. We always appreciate being able to come together and provide some information to our collective clients. So thank you for that. For everyone who's here, we will have another session on Thursday, the 22nd. Cisco will be here with us as we continue the series. So if you have not registered past today, please check out the site. And if I can do anything for you, I think most of you know me. I'm Anne-Marie Santamarina at Lincoln IT, so just feel free to reach out and I'll help connect you with the right people internally. All right, thanks. Have a great day, everybody.
All right, you too.
Thanks, bye.